So good morning, good night, depending on where you are, and welcome to an anniversary album review for Metallica's Load that turns 26 today, June 4th. It came out originally in 1996, and I'm joined again by JC Rock and Metal Reviews. If you don't know his channel, he does a lot of album reviews of newer bands, but also he tackles a lot of classic albums. So please go ahead, check out his channel, and if you like it, subscribe to. And I do some reviews in his channels, and he also collaborates here. And today we said, let's, last night I was watching, I don't know why, some kind of monster documentary, and then I'm like, oh yeah, that I remember that Load turned 26 today. So I said, JC, maybe he's interested to do an album review. So JC, how are you, man?
Okay, yeah, doing good. This is a nice topic. Actually, I told you before, last year I did the 25th anniversary of this, and I did actually did a track list ranking, but it's an album that I've listened to over the years. I'm like a super mega big Metallica fan, and I love all their albums. I don't think there's anything I hate, even like Saint Anger. It does have its problems, but anyway, we're talking about Load, and yeah, so definitely, it's a definitely good album. So
yeah, so what we're gonna do is first, I'm gonna start and I'm gonna say what I was doing back when Load came out and what it meant to be back then. So this album, I remember when it came out really well because it was the last day of high school for me. So I remember just finishing the last day of high school, getting my car and going to the music store and getting Load by Metallica. And I was, back at that time, I was really expecting that album because I really got into Metallica when the Black Album was released. It was actually the first album that I bought for myself in metal. So Metallica was my first introduction to metal or rock music. So it was the first CD that I actually bought. And when Load was coming out, I was really excited. And I know that when Load came out, it got a lot of shit through fans because, it was more drastic sound change from their previous 4 albums. But for me, I think it didn't affect me that much because I knew Metallica first because of the Black Album. So I first got into them with the Black Album, and then I went subsequent and bought the first 4 albums. So when Load came out, it wasn't a huge shock for me. And the way I see Load is like, you can't judge this album as a metal album because it's not a metal album. It's a hard rock album with some blues influence, some country tinge into it. And at that time, alternative rock was dominating the airwaves. At that time, thrash metal wasn't that huge. It had like a huge dip. So I think that when Metallica released Load, obviously the old school fans were like, what is this? This isn't the Metallica that we're used to. And it went further commercial than what the Black Album did. But since I met them with the Black Album, I had no problem with it. And when it first came out, I really enjoyed the album. And obviously, 26 years later, I have some different thoughts for it, but I will keep that later in the video. So that's what I was doing when Load came out. And it really, I really was very excited when the first single dropped, Until It Sleeps. I still think it's a great song. I remember the music video was pretty cool as well. And a lot of people also gave them a lot of shit because they cut their hair. And the album cover, I'm showing here, this is the album cover for Load that it was some semen mixed with blood. And everyone was like, what the hell is this album cover all about? And they even changed the way they put their logo on it. So
yeah, the logo is different.
The logo was really different. And obviously, the hate for Metallica started for some people in the Black Album, but I think with this one, it's when it got really cemented that it was cool to pick on them. But I still think it's a solid album. So that's what I was doing when it came out. What were you doing when Load came out, John?
Okay, when Load came out, I guess I was about 25 years old. So I was living in New York City. I was working the sales job. So I spent a lot of time on the road. I, used the subway a lot. And I remember buying this album on cassette. I bought it like when it first came out. And I was kind of surprised. I didn't really know what to expect. I was a big Metallica fan. I got into them with Master of Puppets, and then more with And Justice for All. Those were the ones that got me into actually like heavy music. But I was kind of surprised. I remember I watched the music video, and it was kind of weird because they cut their hair, they had this weird like eye makeup. So, but I knew it was different, but I thought it was okay. Yeah, you got a cool picture there.
Yeah, I got the picture of them
Yeah.
with the hairnet. Like Kirk looks in that picture like he's about to serve you lunch in the school cafeteria, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's true. But this was an album. I liked it because it did kind of have like almost like a grunge sound. That was kind of my impression of it. Like Alice in Chains, that type of music, or like Soundgarden. That was my impression. I thought they were kind of going for that type of sound with this album, and I was okay with it. I'm not somebody who was like like those like metal elitists who don't like anything after Master of Puppets, but I enjoyed it. And this is one of like the albums in 1996 that I just have a clear memory of just listening to on my Walkman on a cassette. So back in 1996, I remember listening to this one. It was Soundgarden's Down on the Upside and Rage Against the Machine, Evil Empire. Those are the three albums that I remember like dominated my listening in 1996. And I enjoyed it. It was different. And also another thing, back in 1996, bands were kind of like making long albums. I think, like vinyl wasn't really popular back in the mid 90s. It was kind of like dying. So I think a lot of bands, they tried to, like fit a lot of songs on like one side of a CD. So I think that's why this album, I think it's like an hour and 15 minutes long.
It's 78 minutes. It's almost an hour and 20 minutes long.
Yeah.
It's a long album. And when they were doing this, I think they recorded the Reload songs. They did this all at the same time, and they had so much material that's why they did Load. And then a year later, I think Reload came out.
Yeah.
But yeah, the album, it got a lot of like crap, but I think most of the crap was there was a lot of like things about their hair. And I've never understood that, because I'm like, what does hair have to do with the music? I know they did change drastically. This wasn't a thrash metal album, but what they did on Load is like they took what they did in the Black Album and went further down that rabbit hole of more commercial. And to me, there's things on this album that I still think they're very underrated about it. So what we're gonna do now is like, I'll go first. I'm gonna talk about like what I like about this album and what tracks for me are my favorites still. So something that I like about this album is it really sounds good. Bob Rock, who worked also on the Black Album, did an amazing job here on the production. Everything sounds crisp, clear. The guitars, the drums, the bass. It sounds really clean, and you can hear everything. I also love that. To me, there's some hidden gems here that are not played enough. Like, for example, I think the Outlaw Torn that finishes the album is one of the best songs on the album, and it's a song that it's long. It's like it's almost 10 minutes, and it's a song that it has like some slower pace but some great riffing on it. And I don't know, when I listen to this song, I think of a song that could have been like used for like a metal country movie. Like, it has like a little bit of country, but it doesn't overtake the song. And I like the solo of how it ends the album. And to me, this is an album of a tale of two halves. So it has 14 songs, And I think that the beginning 7 songs are stronger. And then sometime in the middle, there's some songs that I wouldn't say they're bad, but they're kind of like generic.
Yeah.
But for example, like I love the opener "Ain't My Bitch." It's a "You Ain't My Bitch" sounded like it reminded me of like it had some sad but true vibes to it, but a little bit
Yeah.
different. Uh, and then they have the song 2x4, which is mid rocker. The House That Jack Built is interesting. Then they go on for the song Until It Sleeps. And Until It Sleeps, to me, is one of the most underrated Metallica songs ever. That song, lyrically strong. You know, it's different because it starts with the dum dum. It starts like with an alternative beat, slower, and he's singing more softly. But then it picks up, and I think the lyrics to "Until It Sleep" it's great. And I'm surprised that a lot of people don't name that song as a song that is a very underrated Metallica song that should get more props. And then, of course, it's followed by King Nothing, which I love King Nothing. The beginning with the guitar like going like, it's like a sound, like a humming sound, and there goes that ta-na-na, ta-na-na. That's another song that's great that I wish they played those songs live more. It's a great rocking song, and if you like the Black Album, I think those like Until It Sleeps and King Nothing could have fit somewhere on the Black Album. I think a little bit, maybe not that much in sound. And then they have one of the first ballads of the album, "Hero of the Day," but I love that song. I think that song sounded very well when they did the S&M Metallica. They did a version of that one, and they added the horns, the strings. So it showed that song could blend so well into a symphonic atmosphere. Then they go "Bleeding Me," which is like the longest song, one of the other long songs on the album. But I really like "Bleeding Me" a lot. And I like "Mama Said," even though "Mama Said" is different for Metallica because that song is really straight up country song. And today, me and John were like chatting, and I was saying to John that I'm surprised that James Hetfield, to this day, hasn't released a country solo album. Because with that song, "Mama Said," that would have been the start of it because he really, his voice goes well into country music, I think. What do you think, John?
Yeah. So we talk about "Mama Said." I really like that ballad. I think James does country really well. That and Southern rock, because if you remember the Garage Stage Revisited album with the covers album they did like after this, they did a cover of "Tuesday's Gone," that Leonard Skinner song. Really great. I mean, James was like perfect for that song. So "Mama Said," this is probably my favorite ballad. I think out of all the ballads on Load, that's the one I like the best. Another song that I like a lot is called "Wasting My Hate," and I think that is probably the thrashiest song on the album.
Yeah.
Probably a song that probably could have fit very well on the Black Album. I think that's the one song that did have that kind of like Black Album sound. But the other ones, like you said, the Outlaw Torn, that's another one of my favorites. Poor Twisted Me, that's a really cool one. And another one, I like Hero of the Day, that one's cool. Until It Sleeps good. And The House That Jack Built, I think that was probably one of the strongest tracks. Another thing you mentioned about them playing live, I've seen Metallica play live 4 times. That's like the one band I've seen the most out of any other band.
Yeah, I saw them 3 times.
3, that's cool.
Yeah.
I saw him, it was in 1990, 1994, and then later 2012 and then 2016. I don't think they played any songs from either Load or Reload in any of the shows I've seen. So it's something that they don't do it. I mean, I don't know. Have you seen them play songs from the Load albums either?
Yeah, they played Fuel.
They did play a few. So maybe when you saw them, it was like during that time. But actually, the first 2 times I saw it was before Load. But Other times I saw it, which was around the Death Magnetic and Hardwired times. They didn't bring back any Load songs, so I think they should bring some songs into their sets. Maybe like Wasting My Hate or The Outlaw Torn. I think that would probably work well live, right?
Yeah, I think so. I know there's some. I was Googling on the internet, and apparently there's a few songs that they never played live. I think they never played live The House That Jack Built, Cure, Ronnie, and Thorn Within. They never played any of those songs live ever. I looked at Google. I'm like, and it said that that's a fact, that those songs weren't played live. If someone watching the video knows that they play live, please comment and correct me. But I did like a search of songs from there that they haven't played live. And yeah, I think they played those songs when they did the tour in 1997. I think they did a video called DVD called Cunning Stunts or something for that era.
Oh yeah,
it's so great that you got to see them in the 1990s. Like, I have a story.
I saw preload. It was like the
you saw them preload. So Metallica was actually going to play in Puerto Rico, I think in 1991, 1992, as part of the Black Album tour. And they were going to play in a stadium, outside stadium, but there was a storm, so much rain that the concert was canceled. And there was like a huge riot. My parents didn't let me go because I was too young. And I was like, oh, I'm going to miss Metallica. And some of my friends from school went. And then it didn't happen. So I'm like, oh, well. And that was in 1992. Metallica didn't return to Puerto Rico until 2009.
Oh.
So people waited. Like the first time that Metallica played in Puerto Rico was in 2009. They just played in Puerto Rico 2 times. 2009 for the Death Magnetic tour, in 2016. I went the 2 times that they went to Puerto Rico, and I first saw them in Tampa. But on the I saw them on the Death Magnetic tour like 6 months before in Tampa, because I'm like, I'm gonna go because they're gonna go to Puerto Rico. So I saw them in Tampa, and then like 2 weeks later they announced they were gonna play Puerto Rico. I'm like, I'm gonna see them again. But they played a different set, because I think they, depending on where they are, they look at their playlist, Spotify playlist, and see which songs are more popular in that area, and they include those songs. I think that's something that they do that's pretty cool. But I think they played Fuel on one of those shows.
Oh yeah, actually that is an exception. I did remember them playing Fuel.
Yeah, but Fuel is in Reload.
Yeah,
but I don't think they play a lot of songs from Load.
No.
And to me, Load is stronger than Reload, in my opinion. I think it has some better songs. So now, it's been 26 years. Now let's go deeper and talk about maybe what hasn't held up so well about this album after the years passes. So to me, at least something that I think that that could have been better of this album is like if they cut a few songs and shorter the runtime. I think 78 minutes is a really long time for an album, and especially an album that it starts like really strong, but then it has like some slower songs. So I think it can get tedious at times. For example, I think songs like, I would take away songs like Ronnie. Ronnie is a song that to me sounds filler. Wasting My Hate, I like. It has some great things on it, but I think there's a few tunes, like I think out of the gate, I think Ronnie's the first one that comes to mind. Like, yeah, they should just, it's a song that it goes before the Outlaw Torn, and it didn't do that much to me. But I think there's another songs in the middle that maybe they could have like shortened, or even Bleeding Me. Bleeding Me is good, but I think, does it have to be that long? I think maybe the song is too long. I think if they cut it a few things and made this album made this album more like a 62-minute runtime, like the Black Album, I think it would have worked better in its favor, especially in the pacing, because it's an album that you're like, okay, it's too long sometimes. And there's some songs from it that really, like Cure. To me, that's another song. Cure is another song that could have been like, sounds generic. They could have cut it out of the album, and the album would have flowed without any problem. So Yeah, there's a few songs that wouldn't work for me, and what I would have done is like take the best songs of Reload, like take the Fuel, the Memory Remains, put it on this album, and I think it would have been stronger in my opinion. But it's I to this day I don't understand the hate that the album got. I think that a lot of people were judging it based on thrash metal, and no, this is a hard rock album, and that's how you have to see it. It's another, you can divide Metallica's career like in three phases. There's the 80s where they were pure thrash, then there's the 90s where they went more hard rock. Then in the 2000s, they tried to go back to their metal roots with Saint Anger. That's another story. And I think with Death Magnetic, they sounded more like what they did, like in the Injustice for All, but more polished.
Yeah, it was more
and yeah, they tried to go back to their previous sound. And yeah, that's the two phases of like three phases. You have the 80s Metallica, the 90s where they changed, the 2000s where they tried to take it back, and the after that, I think in 2010 to 2020 they just released one album, Hardwired to Self-Destruct. So
yeah, no, they did Death Magnetic in 2008, and Hardwired was 2016. So that's pretty much one album in a decade. Yeah,
one album in a decade, because they tour so much. But I think Load, still holds up as a very good rock album in my opinion. What do you think?
Okay. Yeah, I pretty much agree with most of everything you said. The one song I would cut, maybe Ronnie. That was the one that I never really liked. Yeah, you could trim it, maybe Cure, Poor Twisted Me. Like to keep the first like 7 songs, I think that's really strong. Maybe like put like Wasted My Hate like towards the end. It's really, Metallica likes to end with like maybe a very heavy song. The Outlaw Torn, keep that one. Put that one maybe like a little towards the middle. Put Mama Said, like a little more towards the middle. Because I think that's a really good ballad. And I think it's just trimming it down a little bit, it would make a really good album. If you want to make a really perfect album, we could merge the load and reload into a good, and that's a whole other video because otherwise this.
Yeah, that's a whole other video. Yeah.
And I've seen the other channels have done this, so we can do this if you want sometime. But for example, like that one, Fuel and the Memory Remains, those would be 2, and there might be a couple others. So yeah, I think it did hold up, but it was the length. Metallica, Master of Puppets, 8 songs, 45 minutes. That's just like perfect. So again, trim it down a little bit, and I think it is a decent album. Like a hard rock, almost like an alternative rock, like a grunge rock album too.
Yeah, no, it's just a different Metallica, and and you got to go back to the year 1996. It was all about like those bands, grunge bands, like you mentioned, Soundgarden. Yeah. There was so many, like the Bushes, the Live. So the music scene was kind of different, and Metallica tried to adapt a little bit. But something that I find really interesting about these albums and that time of Metallica is like, this is just me thinking out loud. If James Hetfield would have made like a country solo album, maybe Jason Newsted could have worked on some music, and maybe would have still had the same lineup with Jason, because nothing against Robert Trujillo. I think he's a great bass player, but Jason Newsted added additional backing vocals. And I think that's something that Metallica hasn't had since he left. It's just James now, and I think it lacks a little bit, at least in my opinion. And
yeah, I mean, this is a whole other video topic,
yeah,
of course.
That's a whole other topic, but yes,
they didn't treat Jason Newsted well from the beginning, and I think that's a whole other problem.
That's a whole other video. But yeah, I'm gonna give my score after revisiting Load. I listened to it this morning. If I had to rate it from a 1 to a 10, I would give it a solid 7.5 out of 10. I think it's a solid album. that could use a little bit of trimming to make it better. But I honestly don't understand all the hate that it's gotten because it's very well produced, and there's some when they go like really hard, they have some songs that are as hard as the things that they put in the Black Album. So just a little more experimentation, but I still like the album to this day, and I have no problems listening to it whatsoever.
Okay, yeah, I would say the same thing. I'd maybe go an 8. I'd say 8 out of a 10 for me, because I think with Metallica, you know, other than Saint Anger, which I don't really hate, but I think pretty much all their albums are over 8s. You know, with like the early ones being 9s and 10s, but I'd go a solid 8 with this one.
Yeah, I think you know what we should do. We gotta check when Saint Anger has an anniversary, and maybe we should revisit Saint Anger.
Yeah.
So that could be a video. But next up for us, we're gonna do a collaboration video on my channel in a few weeks talking about Deftones' White Pony. So be on the lookout for that. Please, if you like the videos that you're watching, you know, give me a like. Don't forget to subscribe. Check out JC Rock and Metal Reviews channel. I also collaborate with him over there. So what did you think about Load after 26 years? Do you still like it? Comment. What were your favorite tracks? What didn't you like? Were you mad that Metallica cut their hair? Let us know. So until next time, this is Hector the Shield on the couch and JC Rock and Metal Reviews, and we'll see you on the next collaboration. Thank you, and keep it metal.